Hello, everyone. Again, I am Kushal Ibrahim. I am in marketing in Vendavo. Welcome to our coffee talk session today on Vendavo Deal Price Optimizer. Presenters today would be Dan Sakura, business consultant, and Lee, profit evangelist. Quick housekeeping. You can your questions in the Q&A function. You can do that during the session, and we will answer either during the session or after the main presentation is done. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you in the next few days. The main presenter today is Dan Sakura, and Dan, take it on.
Thank you for the warm words, Kushal. Let's start with the most exciting topic, which is confidentiality. This is considered confidential, so as you respect our confidentiality, we will respect yours. My name is Dan Sakura. I'm a business consultant here at Vendavo, and what that means is I typically engage with either our customers or our prospects to understand what kind of pricing pain points they have and see what kind of overlap there is with our software solutions. I have been doing pricing stuff for about 16 years. My first job actually was as an economist for the federal government measuring inflation, which was like really top of mind right now. So keep your eyes peeled for a blog post coming out soon. And I live in Chicago, Illinois with my wife. We're going to have our first baby soon, and we currently have an ungrateful cat named Bob. But enough about us. Let's get into the agenda. So first, for those who are not as familiar with Vendavo, I'm going to just introduce us a little bit, and I'm going to spend most of the time talking about Deal Price Optimizer and then showing a demo of what it does. We will have plenty of time for Q&A, but don't be shy. Go ahead and put them in the chat as you see fit. So who is Vendavo? We are a best-in-class commercial excellence company. We have pricing and selling solutions. We use AI and deep analytics to build up these solutions. And even better, we have expert value consulting services. That means we have a lot of people to support the software. And not to put too fine a point on it, our people are our strength. We have all sorts of industry experience in many verticals, and we are happy to share that expertise. We use the people to support processes. That includes transformation from where you are today to getting you to where you want to go. And of course, we're product driven. We have, again, best-in-class pricing and selling software. When you put all these things together, you get exceptional growth and profitability in the commercial excellence space. A little more detail on what we do and to set the stage for our talk today. We are considered middle office. We typically sit between a CRM and an ERP. Our users are more times than not broken into the sales users and the pricing users. Sales users in green, they are going to be interfacing with the customers. That means that they have to gather product recommendations, put them on a quote, negotiate, and ultimately generate professional documentation to sell to customers. In the blue, we have pricing users. Of course, as a former pricing practitioner myself, we're going to be in the blood and guts, the blocking and tackling of generating prices. That's Vendavo price point down here, takes into account market, other strategies, competitors, anything you want. But you have to link the two. It's not enough to just have these two disparate topics. And where we do that is with our various suite of other helper products. So Sales Optimizer, that's helping to grow average order value with cross-sell. Business Risk Alerts, who's defecting? Give me an early warning on that. On the right side, Margin Bridge Analyzer. This is for my friends in finance, price volume mix, but on steroids. Don't worry though, Dr. Vendavo has the prescription for you. And then Pricing Analytics. This is our playbooks. We've been doing this a long time, and we've distilled our information so you can have it right out of the box. But today in green, we are going to talk about Deal Price Optimizer. That's going to support negotiating prices by giving a pricing envelope. And we'll get into the details of that in just a minute. But before we do, I have a hypothetical scenario for you. What if you were tasked with building new sidewalks at this beautiful college campus, University of Wisconsin in Madison? What would you do? Would you just start building willy-nilly? Probably not. That's a terrible idea. Would you maybe consult the blueprints? Yeah, but they aren't going to necessarily tell you where the world has gone since things were originally installed. What I think you want to do is look for the footprints in the snow. And if you do that, you're going to see you should build here. And pricing is the same way. If you think of your transactional data as a canvas like this, with our help, you can find the footprints in the snow for additional profitability. Mitch, have you ever had any experience with something like this, combing through data to find additional insights? And what did that look like?
Absolutely, Dan, and I love your image here. I look at the footprints and then the bands of green as what we talk about as willingness to pay. Absolutely, and you don't find those bands of willingness to pay in administrative segmentation. You know, when you look at a good, better, best offer or ABCD customers or geographies, those are useful attributes to tease out behaviors, but it's the combination of those that identify segments that are pricing oriented, willingness to pay on pricing oriented. And then you can get some really nice sidewalks that make your grass last a lot longer.
That's right. That's why you're the master of margin, the profit. Thank you, Mitch. So what are we going to do? We're going to take a look at 4 big topics. First, we're going to understand segmentation, and that's grouping customers that look and buy the same way. We will optimize them. That's kind of the name of the game when you're doing price optimization. We want to have specific relevant prices per segment. We are going to take a look at business rules to make sure that humans are overseeing the machine, make sure that whatever recommendations happen make sense in the real world. And we'll touch on very briefly this notion of volume curves. Before we get into software, though, I want to start with the endpoint in mind. We're going to come back to this screen in actual software, but the idea here is we are trying to generate groups of customers, that be your segment, with products, and ultimately get pricing guidance, whether it's in this instance as a margin, could be as a discount, but today we have it as a margin. And these are the floor prices that reps would see when they are consuming this data. So that is the end goal.
Yeah.
As I said, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, this is a perfect example of the difference between administrative segmentation and pricing segmentation. So you've got on the left there 2 different segments, the first 2 lined out there, but you've got the same product. So these recommendations are not on a product level or not on a customer level. They're on an intersection of product and customer. So that's where that usefulness is. That's where you get to that granularity of just enough where it's teased out meaningful information you can take action on, as opposed to blowing out the explosion of every single combination, which may not, will not be useful in every case.
That's right. They're both service kits. One's for a pump, one's for a motor. So of course they're going to have different prices. That's how it works for this segment. Okay, without further ado, let's get into software. This was the endpoint where we wanted to start. Just as a reminder, this is really where you're getting. We're going to see a segment ID that is defined in such a way, and we'll do that in our first step. And we will ultimately have a customer within that segment, and we're going to generate margins for everybody. Okay, so here it is. This is our company. It might not look like it. Up at the top, I have a root node, and this would be all the information that your company generates. You're going to have things like historical margins and revenue, transactions, and there's probably a distribution of how your customers look. But it's not enough to just do this at a very, very high level. We want to segment down. And in this instance, I've let the algorithm help me do that. And what we're doing is breaking things out by first business unit, and that was a manual input that I had created. And then the algorithm goes from there and says, okay, sometimes I consider the country at different points of my segmentation tree. There's also a customer group, typically pretty high up. That means it's going to be important. Industry, very popular. And the idea here is certain industries are going to behave the same way, and certain are going to be very different. So we should take into account those differences. Channel, very, very popular segmentation attribute, whether it's direct or indirect. Those are the most common we see. And then there are a handful of geographic segments or attributes that I would call that. But what does an endpoint or a node actually look like? And I'll pick an arbitrary one here. What we see is this is in the business unit, both the process and service industry. So it's combined two of them. We're looking at these two customer groups, CPG and semiconductor. It's in these states and provinces, these divisions, and ultimately we're looking at the retail indirect channel in Germany. And just to give you something to compare and contrast against, I'm going to pick another node over here, which just, okay, we're in Southeast England, still retail indirect, but it's electronics, it's semiconductor. So it's a different group that is buying a different way, thus should have a different willingness to pay. Those different footprints in the snow. So we've segmented our customers. They are in groups that look similar. We have reduced the variation among these, and we're using AI to pick where to break or split our tree into these different nodes. From here, we'll move to optimization. We start with that same segmentation tree. This is the basis, and this is where we go from here. I'll pick this node again. This seemed pretty good. And this is where the rubber starts to meet the road. At the top, well, maybe I should back up for a minute. Many other pricing optimization just says, yeah, there you go, put it out there. We created segments and now slap a price on it. We like to take it in two different ways. We think about the power. We derive how able you are to push through prices in a given segment. Green is good, red is bad, yellow is somewhere in the middle. So we could push through some price here, have some strength, but we balance that with risk. And red is bad, green is good. A high risk segment is at a bigger risk for losing revenue and margin. You can think of it very simply this way. A segment that has 2 customers is going to be much riskier than one that has 200 customers. That's oversimplifying it a little bit, but the idea is we need to balance the notion of pushing through prices with what it might cost us. And this is a differentiator. And in fact, Power and Risk is a patented Vendavo approach. Mitch, do you have anything to add to this before I move along?
Yeah, I would definitely emphasize that point you just made around the risk. It's like, yeah, a small number of customers, or perhaps even worse, a small number of customers with a high percentage of your revenue or a high percentage of your margin. The consequences of taking that action, even if it's relatively low risk, might be worth a second look. And so this is where our software does that Centaur approach of leveraging machine learning and algorithms and AI to surface possible actions, present them in a salient manner for the business savvy person that's looking at and talking with the team members about it, and then making a decision on things that aren't necessarily in the data, things that may not have been reflected in there, things that might be happening in the future that people have knowledge of, saying, I understand what the data is saying, but based on what we know on top of that, we're going to make a decision thus and so. So I think that's a key point of the risk and then the business savvy on top of that.
Great, well said. Now, if I had to distill down this whole concept of segmentation and optimization and all that fun stuff down to one image, this is where I would do it. This histogram right here. Across the x-axis, these are margin buckets. Across the y-axis, that's revenue. So that means the height of the blue bar indicates the revenue in each of those margin buckets. So this is 225,000. This one over here is 466,000. This orange line is a cumulative total of revenue for the segment, so it should end up at 100, and sure enough, it does. Okay, here's where the magic comes in. I have these little flags. There's 4 of them. This is my historical margin for the segment. And then I have 3 additional ones: the stretch, the target, and the floor. We're going to start with the target. This is what we consider the analytically fair goal that a sales rep should try to sell at in order to ink a creative business in this segment. Then we think about the stretch, and this is a higher goal for the rep to achieve. Some of our customers will provide additional comp if a rep does transact at this stretch level, but you can see we didn't pick the highest number in the entirety of the distribution. That'd be crazy. It's just a little bit more. But I think the most important metric we get out of this whole thing is the floor price here in red. And the idea is, as best you can, don't transact below the floor. Specifically, what you want to do is eliminate these 1Z, 2Z transactions over here, and you'll ultimately end up compressing the distribution over time. It should get closer to a central tendency, probably closer to the target. Now, with that being said, if customers are happy to pay us up here, we'll let them. We don't, chop off their prices or anything like that. That wouldn't be a good business practice. So this is, in my mind, the essence of the segmentation and optimization piece. Mitch, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think this is key understanding of what actions can be taken based on having done the work around building the segments of willingness to pay. Again, those intersections of different customers against different product types, and the behavior is being modeled here. And yes, a lot of people think primarily around the right hand side of the table here. What can we do to get a little bit more stretch? How can we make sure we don't hit the floor? But absolutely, there's a ton of work with that long tail to the left of a lot of revenue and margin that can be picked up just by cleaning those up. Those folks are in this bucket because they have similar willingness to pay. This is not a histogram of everybody. This is a histogram of a specific group of similar willingness to pay. So a tremendous amount of improvement can be done on the left-hand side of the curve just by cleaning up those outliers and getting that distribution, as you said, a little bit more normalized.
Mm-hmm. This is the lowest of low-hanging fruit.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay, let's get a couple more things in here where we see if I needed some proof, and this would be a pricing person looking at this rather than a salesperson, but recent transactions, just so I can have an idea of who's buying what and what quantity, margins, and revenue. It's right there in the software. And down here, these are how the pricing envelope is generated. The target is generated by algorithm. That's this power and risk notion here. And then the floor and stretch are generated currently as offsets to the target. I, as a pricing user, may want to tighten this up a little bit. I want to have less of a floor, maybe more of a floor. I want to give more room for my salespeople to negotiate, and then less of a target. So we'll cut this down to plus 5%. That's fine. And there you go. We're going to see it. Well, I guess I broke the algorithm here, but what the idea is, you could use this right within the tool. And what we're considering here are the metrics of skewness when it comes to power. What does that distribution look like? Do we have a good story to tell when it comes to pushing through price? And then for risk, it's that margin percentage, how many customers? And as Mitch said, who is responsible for a lot of revenue in this segment? So we have generated our prices here, but we very much think that the intersection of the art and the science, the human and the machine, this is where you're going to get the best benefit. And that's why once I generate the prices and that would regenerate those flags, we would consider the business rules that go on top of this. And a business rule, I put one in already. This is a price cap. Just because the model says, oh, you should go ahead and raise the prices by, 20% on a given segment with some certain products, I don't know that anybody wants that to happen in the real world. So this rule says for this particular node in the industrial segment, don't raise the prices more than 3%. You can easily tweak this, make it 5% if you so like, but we'll keep it at 3 for now because we are happy with that. But maybe what we do want to do is modify the applicability. In addition to industrials, let's get the process industry in there as well. So I apply it here, and then I can rerun the rule, and ultimately I will generate the prices that we saw at the outset. So that's your segmented customers with specific products that have a stretch, target, and floor price. So with that, I think I'm going to jump back into PowerPoint because I want to address one somewhat niche topic. A lot of our manufacturer and distributor customers use this, but many don't. And that's the notion of a volume curve. The volume curve is sometimes also called quantity breaks. And the idea here is we can numerically or statistically define what does it mean to have a reasonable quantity break and a price thereof. So these blue circles in the background indicate where the data is. This darker blue line, I went ahead and hand typed in these proposed volume discounts because it makes sense to have nice round numbers when it comes to a discount when you're speaking with a customer, but 25 up to 33%, nice and smooth through here. But this got us, the reason I ended up at these numbers is because I was able to take a look at the average historical discounts, smooth them out with regression, and ultimately tailor it to something that makes sense in the real world. So again, that's the art and the science, the human and the machine coming up with a best practice. So what did we take a look at? We saw segmentation, optimization, business rules, and volume curves. With the segmentation, it was that grouping. It was done, I would say, very powerfully and very easily. Rather than sticking with just the A, B, C, D, we found, I guess, an uneven tree that shows sometimes you should go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and sometimes you stop at A, B, C. Mitch, any comments about that before we move along? Or anything to add on what we saw thus far?
No, yeah, the powerful grouping, the segmentation, the optimization in terms of being able to get recommendations out there on a basis that looks at the shape of the curve on an automatic basis, and then being able to override the math with business savvy, with your business rules, making sure there's some checks in there. And I love this volume curves capability. My background was in the process industry, lots of commodity goods, selling millions of tons of product, and volume curves were very important for my go-to-market process. But on one hand, execution against those and how my customers, eventually they always talk, right? Compared how they performed, they were always coming up with discrepancies because somebody was looking at a volume curve basis that was 2 years old because that was their contract, and then somebody just got a new contract this year and they've got something else. So the volume curves looks at all the things you've done, and it can suggest ideas in terms of replicating that going forward and giving guidance on that going forward. Or you can look at and say, I know that's what I've done, but that's not what I want to do going forward. And as you did, adjust those things so that make sense in your business situations, in the markets that you're going to. And then going forward, you have much more consistency on that. And you have a way to explain for folks that maybe are going to have to get a change in their volume curve, that you say, now I'm going to be treating you and all your competitors that you meet in the market on a common basis. And so they have that assurance that they're being held on the same basis going forward. Even if they're buying a lot or a small, they're being held in a competitive position so that they're not coming to you to make that right. You're giving them a good basis for going to market.
Absolutely right. In addition to consistency, you can imagine how much quicker this is to do. So the administrative burden and overhead is shrunk, makes everybody's lives easier and less stressful. Okay, that was a pretty whirlwind tour through deal price optimization. Now I think it's time for Q&A.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the first question we got came in earlier, and I'll rephrase that for everyone, or repitch it for everyone in case you missed that. Does the new version of PA provide segmentation option? And I jumped in there, and Dan, you ran this out. The segmentation capabilities that you just showed us, those are generated in Deal Price Optimizer, but the attributes of those segments can be made available in PA, right?
Yeah, it's a very common use case for PA is profit analyzer. Good question. And a use case that I've seen that's very powerful is the reporting on, I guess, what I'll call compliance against what has been generated. So who's transacting at target, who is transacting below floor, and you can do that from a customer level, from a country or other geographic region, or sometimes I'm sorry if any salespeople are in the audience, they might not like to hear this, but you can track the salespeople to see if they're going below floor too frequently.
So, and Dan, that leads me into our first question that's popping up here. Is there a way to make sure sales teams understand why the guidance that is being provided is there? What can you speak to that?
Yes, I think that it is too frequent. I've been a part of these in a past life where you let the math get in the way of a good story. A key piece to any software is definitely with the implementation and change management. So we'll tab back over here to DPO. I'm going to get out of these business rules and go to the guidance. I, as a salesperson, would never come into this tool. It's too complicated and I don't need it as part of my job. I'm going to probably publish this somewhere. And where could I publish it? Well, you would more likely than not put it into a CRM, such as salesforce.com. So at the time of opportunity creation, I might have my guidance right there in front of me. Or what we like to do at Vendavo is have this inform CPQ, configure price quote. So I, as a rep, I'm making a quote for a given customer. I've added a bunch of products. I have a deal score at the top. I have line item deal scores with recommendations that go on each of them. So I can know that stretch target floor on each. And the cool thing is when you're in CPQ, if I have 3 products and I know a customer really cares about one, maybe I go to the floor on that one product, but I can capture margin on the other 2 where they're not as price sensitive. So that's where I think reps can get a lot of value when they see it. But this is what we call a glass box. Anybody can see into the guts of it and understand how we generated all these prices. And on top of that, our value consulting and implementation teams spend a lot of time making sure that there's comfort within that change management piece of what we're doing before we do it.
Absolutely. And that glass box, we can take the lid off and adjust it. We know how the calculations are being made. We can adjust it so that it can be driven by that business savvy, right? Here's another question coming in, and this is a great one. Is there a reason for using margin as pricing guidance? That is the segmentation distribution chart showed earlier versus using actual price levels.
I'm sorry, I was reading the check. Can you repeat that one more time? So that was versus the actual price levels, but I'd like to hear the whole thing. I was looking at Sandeep and Maria. I'm going to answer those real quick. Sandeep asked, can this integrate well with Oracle CPQ? Yes, this is agnostic when it comes to the implication there. We do have our own CPQ software, but of course, we're happy to play with others with this. And as far as Maria's question, and then we'll get back. Well, I see one more from Sonia, and maybe we'll answer that and then get to Mitch. How do you come about the 17 and 18 in segmentation with the algorithm? The short answer is yes. We use the algorithm to determine them and which one would be the lowest. Well, 17 versus 18 are not, one is not inherently lower than the other unless you're referring to low being down this way. We just number all of the segments. So that's what that is, sequentially and how they're generated. But so I hope that answers your question there. But the lowest would be, we would statistically determine, oh, is it a good idea to break up this? Let's take this one. In this communications node, what's happening here is we've run through and said, yes, we want to split on business unit. Yes, on customer group. Yes, on state or province. We're in customer industry, and the algorithm has said, should I split this any further? And as it turns out, yes, we want to split it into Germany and then France over here. Those are 2 distinct segments that are acting differently. And so Maria, to your question, Maria, yes, just to identify them.
Exactly. Yeah, position in the hierarchy is just an organizational structure of the attributes that are used to generate the segments. They're not necessarily indicating higher or lower prices. Again, you can have a customer show up in many of these segments depending on what intersection with products. They may be very price sensitive on product line A and very price insensitive on product line B, for example. So you could have that intersection show up multiple times. Rolling back to that question that came in.
I promise I'll listen this time, Mitch.
Okay, here we go. Is there a reason for using margin as pricing guidance? The example there, the segment distribution chart showed earlier, versus using actual price levels. So this is kind of a absolute price versus revenue versus margin. So lean into that, Dan.
Oh, I'd be happy to. The reason for that is because at a higher level, and I'm rerunning this because remember I made those changes to those flags that I needed to regenerate. The reason that we do the different price, we don't do price levels, we do either margin or discount, is because when you're doing a price level within a product family, there could be high discrepancies in terms of prices, right? So if I think of, I could have like generators. I could have a $2,000 generator and a $20,000 generator. It's hard to recommend what a net price would be in that instance. Rather, it is better to for that segment and for those products to recommend either a discount or a margin for those.
Right. The spot on there. Remember, these intersections are combinations of customers and products. You can have multiple products in there that might not even be in the same product family.
Mm-hmm.
But the willingness to pay says you have a percentage impact, latent capability to move things on a similar percentage impact. So think of it as indices applied to prices. That's why the discounts off prices is a way to run it. If you're more sensitive to margins, we can absolutely run it on a margin basis as well.
Mm-hmm. I see a question in the chat from Sonia. Can this be integrated with IQMS? Yes, because they use APIs to pull in data. That's typically how we transfer data. If you really want to use flat files, we can, but yes, we can integrate with that. And it could be a situation where, I mean, this is either a standalone web product or it could populate into an iframe if there's a lot of pain around going between multiple screens.
Absolutely. And we've got a little bit more time here if folks have some more questions. There's one more popping up here. Oh, yeah, you're quite welcome, of course. So Dan, we're not seeing anything else pop up right now. A couple more coming in from a different channel are, what's the importance of aligning my pricing with my customers' willingness to pay?
Great question. And the answer to that is, if everybody took Econ 101 and we understand that different groups of customers or people value things in different ways. So if you have one static price for everybody to pay, what you end up doing is for certain customers, it's too high a price. They're just not going to buy at all. And other customers, you end up leaving money on the table because you're priced too low. They say, oh, you're only charging me $10. I would have paid $15. So by having segmentation and generating multiple prices that apply to each segment, you can capture that business that you would have lost because you were too high. You can think of like a matinee with a senior's price. It's a lower price and they are able to participate and go to watch the movies. Or, for customers that would have paid a higher price, you can charge a premium for them because maybe you're offering, a premium viewing or something like that. So it's a way to capture both revenue and margin by offering differentiated pricing.
For sure. And this is one of the key, people often equate willingness to pay to price elasticity. Similar, but we use the term willingness to pay to talk about behaviors in B2B type of situations. B2C is often transactional, one single transaction. It's all or nothing, and there's not a lot of bells and whistles that tie to that, externalities tied to that. In a B2B conversation, you're almost always in the middle of a long relationship. It's not just this one sale. You're looking at their behavior in the past as hopefully indicative of the future, with your business savvy on top of that to say where you might need to make exceptions. But you're looking at trying to, yes, win the sale of this individual price on this individual product you're putting out. But that has to be in context of maybe at least the quote that you're putting in front that may be hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of SKUs, but you're going to quote to them next year or in 2 years, whenever that contract's out. So you need to preserve that relationship. And so that's a underlying capability, underlying foundational aspect of willingness to pay. Willingness to pay means they're happy and they will come back and do more business with you. That's a big differentiation for B2B considerations for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry.
Did someone else want to chime in? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think here's a question. Can you speak to how this tool integrates with an ERP system and a CPQ system in a little bit more detail?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to go back to a couple slides ago. Let's get back into the PowerPoint focus here. I think this is a good, okay, yeah, that was very cute. This is a good slide here. If there's some screen lag, I'm back on Vendavo as a part of the middle office. So here's how we typically integrate, whether it is with CRM or ERP, and we're agnostic on any of them. We are typically receiving or passing data via API. Could be a real-time call, could be something that is near real-time, but that's usually how it's done. As far as where do the recommendations go? Well, if you give me a minute, I could go pull up in Salesforce, for example, when a salesperson has a new opportunity come in, we can have the opportunity object be populated with DPO data. That would be the pricing envelope, or within CPQ. So I'm going to, you guys will permit me, I've been a good host, I can go grab that. So what we're going to look at in a second here is, what does it mean to have data in CRM, as a for example? And the same thing would hold true for ERP. It's just I happen to have a CRM example right in front of me. I'll reshare my screen in just a moment as I continue logging on. Okay.
And Dan, while you're doing that, a quick aside here. There's a question: what is the self-serve training for Vendavo? How is that organized? We are continuing adding to our team. It'd be nice to have somewhere they could go to learn this and other reporting options. And I guess, Dan, the short answer there is Vendavo University, and connect up with your customer success manager, and they can make sure that you have access to that and get the latest and greatest in training.
Oh yeah, it's great content. It's always on. So you don't have to talk to anybody. You can save the cost of having someone fly, on site to do anything like that. So I'm going to answer this question, and I see two more about changing costs. That's an issue that's near and dear to my heart as a former economist. So I'm in Salesforce here. I have the details of an opportunity here. It's a multi-currency BASF Japan. It's denominated in yen, actually. So what I could do is configure, and this is going to jump to an iframe here, where I can select my products. And once I select my products, I'm only going to put one on here just to prove the concept. I have added it to a quote. And when I get to my quote, I see deal guidance. The deal is 112, green is good, red is bad. This is where it happens. In the pricing waterfall, I'll click on the target, where I can see these are the discounts. And this is a funny one because I'm using yen and the currency conversion is a little wacky right now. But this is where I would have the stretch target and floor for the rep at the time of quote creation. And even better, right here, we have defaulted, oh, sorry, too much scrolling. We've defaulted this to this is the target price from deal price optimization. This is where you should transact. You as a sales rep have the opportunity to enter in a discount. If you go crazy and do something like 75%, you're going to need approval. That's what this is, because there's a conflict. You need to talk to the VP group about this. But that's where this all ties together. We generate guidance. It gets to the reps in some form or fashion, whether through CPQ, CRM, or a combination of the two. It could be pushed into ERP directly, like many times we see this in a green screen operation where you're clicking away and the target price appears right there. So that's how we integrate there. Now, as far as these questions about incorporating changing costs, which certainly are happening at a frequent pace, most recent wholesale price or producer price index was 10.8% annualized, which is a lot. So this is how we control for that is, well, we'll just leave it right here, that's why we generate a margin recommendation or a discount recommendation, deal price optimization. That gets around the problem. If you generate a net or a flat price, well, you always have to constantly be inflating that because of these cost things. Now, behind the scenes, there's a notion of I guess, price management, Vendavo price point, where you're going to set those competitive-based pricing, cost-based, and that's going to be the portion that ingests your cost data and ingests competitive data and all that, and generates a price. And that's how you would keep on top of the cost piece, making sure it flows through. And then at the end of the day, when you do DPO, you end up having the appropriate discount or margin, regardless of what the cost is. So I had a request for contact information. I'm happy to do that. Let's go.
I'll drop that in for us, Dan, no worries.
I'll put this one up on the screen. Not that we have to end what we're doing here, but this is me, Dan Sikora. That's my email address. This is my actual cell phone number. Happy to chat. I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to, you can go to our website and talk to an expert. It's right there. Click a button. We're happy to reach out to you. I'm happy to chat whenever you want. Any other questions or comments? We didn't talk about admin too much. I could certainly go into that.
Dan, there's one question coming in terms of transactional capability. What are the practical limits on numbers of transactions on DPO?
I'm going to answer that in two different ways. How much is too much and how much is too little? How much is too much? Well, we can handle billions of records. We haven't run into a situation where the number of records is something that we can't churn through. So I'm not concerned there. As far as the how much is too little, we'll back up for a second and talk about what data we typically use here. Customer master, product master, and transaction data. Now, by definition or by the nature of the system, when it's running its algorithm in splitting into the different nodes, there is a threshold for, you have to have, I think it's set as a default, like 50 transactions to, yes, be able to be split further. If you're running under 50 transactions in a given segment, that's probably too small to draw inferences from. And we want to err on the side of caution. We would rather not get, too detailed. So it's a little bit of a Goldilocks situation, even if it, there's possibly theoretically too much. You don't want to go too little. You'd like to be just right, but at some level, the system's going to control or take care of it.
Perfect. Sounds good. I will note that folks are asking about the slides. We will share out a webinar link on this, and if you need some more specific information on the points, happy to set up a meeting. Let us know, and we'll get a better understanding of what your questions are and make sure that we're serving your needs exactly. Okay, this is looking really good. Here's another question. Timeline and cost. Well, cost is all dependent. Company specific, yes, exactly as you noted. What would be a timeline on this, Dan?
This can be fairly quick. And to go back to something I just said, what are the big three that we're looking for? It's the customer data master, the product master, and transaction data. And almost everybody that we work with has at least some version of that. Now, the refrain I hear a lot of times is, oh, our data is not clean or it's not perfect. If you are waiting for perfect data, you're going to be waiting forever. But anyway, it can be, a number of weeks to get this going, up to a few months. And some of that, the art there in why hemming and hawing is each company is different. There's always a little bit of nuance to each of them, and we don't just want to jam everything through the data pipe and say have fun with it. We want to make sure that we capture that nuance. So that sometimes takes a little bit of time. We would work directly with your team to understand that nuance and make sure it's captured, because if we don't, then we generate recommendations that nobody cares about. And if we do that, why bother?
Absolutely. Actionable, interesting context for the sellers to have meaningful, productive conversations, effective conversations with the customers and prospects, because ultimately this is all about adding more to the top line and to the bottom line for sustained success for the organization. Both the selling organization and our customers, the buying organization, our customers in this case. Mm-hmm. All right, Dan, I want to thank you for a tremendous set of context and information here around how Vendavo does optimization for negotiations, specifically in deal price guidance, how that ties into the selling motions, how it can surface up and support sellers, and really emphasizing the capabilities of the pricers out there, how folks can leverage the work that they're doing right now, making that available in even more actionable, right in the moment instances for the sellers with context for decisions, context for action. So it's a way to really leverage all the pricing smarts that are out there that have been developed and make it deliver and add to the benefit of the customer. All right.
Thank you, Mitch. And thank you to everyone in the audience.
Absolutely. And again, you'll get a link to this webinar. Feel free to reach out to us if you have specific follow-up questions to either Dan or myself. And thanks for joining us today. So until we speak again, have a profitable day.